and welcome to my back garden. My name is Mike B and I've been a sound engineer for a few years now. I've worked as a theatre technician in concert halls, I've also toured. Today I just want to go through a little instructional about what I love to do, and I often get people coming up to me asking me, oh, I'm putting on a show, I'm putting on an event, you know, maybe like a folk festival, mate's birthday party, have a rave, mosh pit, absolutely anything. And they don't know where to start, so they come to me, and quite often I'll get people asking me for, oh, should I have this speaker, should I have that speaker, should I have this amp, you know, how big do I want to go with this or that, and they don't really have an understanding about what they need and where everything is laid out. So I just wanted to do this little instructional today about what you might need, what things look like, a bit of system flow, and this might be a bit of a stepping stone towards understanding a bit more when someone starts talking technical jargon at you, which we all tend to do. So grab a drink, grab a cup of tea or a beer or something, I don't know, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope this helps. So, just going to go to the first page. Now, I would like to say in this example that we've got this hypothetical situation, maybe of a folk festival or something like that. You've got some small bands who are used to playing in pubs. You're in a marquee, maybe 100 to 200 people, and you're going to have on the side a stage set up. So there's your stage. Now I've left quite a lot of room here because I would like to say that this is your designated dance floor area. Maybe you'd have speakers here, maybe you'd have lights, but at the moment we're just going to talk about the sound. So this is your stage. Now, on the stage, obviously we're going to have musicians, and when you're talking about a local PA system, we're looking to reinforce the sound. We're looking to amplify instruments, and more importantly vocalists who will sit underneath louder acoustic instruments, i.e. drums are quite loud, basses, they usually turn up with their own amplification, so on stage their presence is quite loud. Electric guitars, they're quite loud. So usually these are the sort of people that you might not put into a local PA. Obviously if you're playing to a larger arena, maybe, or 2,000 people or even 500 people plus, you might put everyone through the PA, but we'll come to that in a different video. Anyway, for this example, as I said, maybe we'd have drums, we're going to have a bass, we're going to have an electric guitar, we're going to have an acoustic guitar, violin, and one vocalist. So, here we have our stage, we have these people turn up, and first of all you need to work out what you're going to amplify, what you're going to need, how many channels you've got on stage, and then we can talk about how you're going to make them sound bigger and make them sound fuller so the audience have a good time. So on stage I would recommend that your drums go in the centre, but a lot of people don't. Sometimes you'll have bass on one side, drums on the other, but in this example we're going to have drums in the centre. Bass we will have over here on one side, that can be my bass, and electric guitars maybe we'll have on the other side. So already we're trying to make an even spread of sounds. Usually you'd either want your kick or your bass in the centre, because that will give a nice even amount of coverage to your room. We'll put electric guitar on the opposite side to the bass because they're quite loud. You want to have separation, but obviously they're going to be loud enough to amplify themselves. Let's talk about our acoustic guitar. Maybe we'll have him over here, or her, sorry. We might have violin down the front, and a vox in centre. So, the people we want to mic up. Obviously the vocalist will need miking, because they're quite quiet. The violin, I would suggest that you would want to mic up. The acoustic guitar, we will say, needs miking up. Now in this example we're going to use something called an electroacoustic, which has the possibility of going direct into the desk, or direct in with a mini jack, sorry not a mini jack, a jack. Standard guitar lead, which will go into the stage box or into a DI, and then straight to the mixer. So that's three people we've got already. Electric guitars, as I said, we're not going to touch. Drums, I might put one on the kick drum, just so we have a little bit of punch, so everyone stays in time, because obviously that's what you want, everyone to stay in time, everyone to be tight, everyone have a good time. So we've got 4 people in total that we're going to mic up. Now, these 4 people are going to need to be heard, so eventually we'll come around to the point where we do need speakers. So I'm going to say, for an example, if we're using a room for say 150, 200 people, I'd say maybe 500 watt speakers would be a decent size to start at. I would also suggest, if this is your first event, I'd advise going for powered speakers. Now the difference between these is, let me draw it on another one. So a powered speaker, you can go direct in, and it will have its own amplifier within it. That amplifier will be specifically made for that speaker, and you don't need to worry about ratings or specifications against each other. It saves you one more thing. So I would look at something called powered speakers. Nice and easy. On the other side, you also have something called passive speakers, which don't have an amplifier built in, and in fact you'll need to also hire or buy an amplifier. So instead the signal will come into here, it will get amplified from a line level to an amplified signal, and that will be transported either via a thicker jack or maybe via a speak-on, which is a different source of cable. So if this is your first event, I would recommend going for some powered speakers. Maybe 250 to 500 watt speakers should sort you out. Right, coming back to our original drawing, what have we done? We've got two speakers. Now, these people are going to need to be treated somehow. They're going to need to be kept hold of. You're going to have to boost the vocal, you're going to have to bring down the violin maybe slightly, or in a solo for the violin you're going to bring it up. So you need a mixer to be able to do that. Now mixers come in all shapes and sizes. For this example we've only got a small setup, so I'm recommending maybe something as simple and as small as this. This is a Yamaha MG10, which is actually my first mixer I ever bought. As you can see here, you've got some inputs. These are called XLR inputs. And if you look at your microphones, it's a standard dynamic microphone which you'd use for a vocalist. You might even put it on the 12th fret in front of a guitar if you hadn't got another mic. Or you could put it easily in the kick drum. I've used dynamic mics, SM58s in kick drums if you haven't got better microphones, or if you don't know. They'll take the punch. Anyway, you can see here I've got an XLR which requires an XLR cable. As you can see, that will slot in there quite nicely. Just press that, it comes apart. So that's your microphone, and that's your cable. Will take you all the way to something called a stage box. Now the stage box will link you from the stage down to a mixer position, because as your sound engineer you'd want to be out the front and in between the two speakers. That's so you can get an even idea of what's left, what's right. Maybe you would have in your mix, you'd have the acoustic guitar slightly panned to the right, maybe you'd have the violin slightly panned to the left to give that even separation, while your vocal sits down the middle. So you're going to want to be fairly central. I know if you push for space, maybe you'd be back here or back here behind the speakers, which isn't ideal. And not quite often you'll see sound engineers running round to the front just to have a check, and then running all the way back again. And we've all done gigs like that. Anyway, so your stage box, I'm going to say, is just off stage here. Now this stage box is a number of inputs, and it has a number of returns, or number of outputs going back to it. For this example, we actually only need 4, as I said, because that's the only amount we're miking up. But let's say we've got a standard box, maybe with 12 inputs, and say 4 returns. Now the inputs we use for the microphones, and the returns we will actually use the same cable to transfer the signal back to these speakers, so we don't need to run long cables all the way around the room. So we can already put in return 1 and return 2. We'll go from here, maybe across the front, or around the back I advise, but for now we're going to do it around the front so you can see. And return 2 is going to be into that speaker. Remember, as I said, these are powered speakers. There you go. This is going to be left, that's going to be right. I usually do this as channel A and channel B if I was using a separate amp, because I always like to know that my 1 and 2, like I'd read from left to right. However, this is now going to be A and B on my returns, or 1 and 2 on my returns, of which I've got 4. My inputs are now going to be 1, 2, 3 and 4 for the kick drum, sorry. So you can use up your inputs on your stage box. The stage box will then feed round to wherever your mixer is going to be, and for this example I'd like to just hypothetically say I've got the best position just behind the dance floor, and we're going to have our tech area here. So within this, as I said, we're going to need a little mixer. And this mixer, as I said, for 4 channels is perfect because we have the ability to have 4 microphones going in here, which is all we need. We have an ability to set the gain, some EQ. We could even have some effects going which send a portion of the sound, and pan a little bit left, maybe a little bit right, and our overall volume. Over here we will have our master volume as well. Now with this mixer, this is also where you might, if you had an iPod or something like that, you'd want to plug in something like this, which is a mini jack cable, which goes from 2 RCA connectors to a mini jack or a headphone connector like you would usually use for your headphones. On this mixer, as you can see, I have 2 channels with RCA inputs just there, so I could pop them in there, and down here 7 and 8, that would be my channel for whatever I wanted, maybe my iPhone, maybe my iPod. I absolutely hate people calling it an iPod cable. It's a mini jack cable, or probably if you wanted to get more technical you could, but needless to say it's definitely not manufactured just for iPods, so people who say that deserve a slap. If you find yourself with one of these cables and you've got a mixer that doesn't have those kind of inputs, you can always go and find some connectors, converters, which will go from RCA to an XLR input, and then you're laughing. Okay, so back to our setup. What have we got so far? Let's start making a bit of a list. We've got 2 500 watt speakers, I'll say powered speakers, and I'd recommend that they need to be above head height as well, because you want the sound to be able to travel right to the back of the room without getting muffled by bodies in the way, because I'm sure, as you know, if you've been outside a club, the sounds that you hear are the low sounds. That's because the walls and the absorption of the room will actually affect the sound, and the lower frequencies will get through. So you don't want the sound to go through bodies, you want it to be above the head height. So I would recommend getting 2 speaker tripods. On stage we've actually used 1, 2, 3, 4 XLRs, which, remember, are those ones for your microphones. I always recommend getting more than you need. So you've used 4, but maybe you'd get 6, for example. There you go, 6 XLR cables. Maybe you've got an acoustic guitar. That would also, as I said, go into a DI box, which we can talk about more in a different video. But a DI box essentially replaces the need for a microphone. And you'd plug your XLR into a DI box, and then from your guitar you would plug into that with your instrument cable, your jack cable. So let's say 1 DI box, and obviously with that, musicians should turn up with their own cables. It really pisses me off when people don't turn up with their own cables, but as the engineer you've got to be able to save the day at the last minute, so let's put down 2 jack to jacks, or instrument cables, whatever you want to call it. We've also talked about microphones, and for this I'm going to get really simple and just say 4 microphones. Industry standard are SM58s. In fact, I haven't got one right here, but this is a dynamic microphone which looks exceedingly similar to an SM58. This is what people use for vocals. You can do most things with this microphone. And indeed, if you were miking up a violin, you had it on top, I'm sure you could get some sort of sound out of it. They're also very robust. If you're going to a folk festival or you're a mate's party, these mics you can pick up fairly cheaply, and they can get chucked about quite a lot. You've probably seen people swinging them around on stage, etc. So, we have a mixer, which I've talked about. We have the speakers. We need information to get from here to here, and this is something called a loom that does that. Now, a loom is essentially a glorified extension cable for XLRs and for jacks, and it allows information to go around the room from the stage to the mix position. So we've got the stage box at the side, and the loom will actually go either around the side of the room, or sometimes you see them come down the middle. Certainly in festivals you'll have a loom in trunking which goes over the top of that. In fact, the other day I saw a little girl doing cartwheels down the trunking in the centre of an event, which is quite sweet. Anyway, so this one we've actually done around the outside, and that will come there and into your mixer. Now remember, at the other end, because you've got the box this end, you'll have the tails this end, so you'll have all the splay out of cables. And you could plug those in 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 12, because we said we had 12 ins, and your returns will actually go out of your master output. Notice at the moment I've left 2 returns untouched. I will talk about that in the end. However, at the moment, in terms of signal flow, we've got a microphone here on 1, which will feed into number 1 here. I don't want to argue too much about why you would have the vocal as 1, or maybe most people have kick drum as 1, but in this example, because you just need to know the basics of signal flow, we're going to say your vocal is 1. So that goes into number 1 up here. That obviously then gets transported around the room and goes into number 1 down here. Let's say, for example, that's number 1 on our mixer. It travels down here, gets treated by our volume at the end and our master volume as well, goes back out of our outputs through our 2 returns, which come out here, A and B. A will go to left and B will go to right. So there we already have a signal flow. We already have, as long as everything's turned on and everything's in the right format, you should hear something. I won't talk now about EQ because that'll just muddle things up, but at the moment you can see I've actually made a little log of what we need. Over here I might say, instead of a 4-channel mixer, maybe we'll say an 8-channel mixer. You can get differences between analog and digital mixes. Digital mixes quite often have a lot more use, and you can, if you're on a budget and you can afford more than an analog, I would say go to a digital, or if you could hire a digital, because they're a bit more versatile, bit more dynamic. You can do more things. People might argue with me now about analog got a better sound, but at this small stage, small event, you know, or a party for your mates, I'm quite sure an analog mix will be fine. This, for example, as I said earlier, is an analog mixer, and it's served me very well for pub gigs, and if you've got a small scale thing like this, it's fine, absolutely fine. So now we've got our basic layout. You've got the mixer where you are, you can be down here, and you've got your loom or snake that goes to a stage box. You've got your inputs of 1, 2, 3, 4 along here, vox, violin, acoustic, and you've got your guitar. They're all going to microphones, and you've got the 2 returns that are going to your powered speakers. Now remember, as I said, we've got 2 returns that are just doing nothing at the moment. Now usually it's good on stage if you can hear a bit of yourself. Certainly people like the drummer won't hear the vocalist. And that's why we talk about things called monitors. Now monitors, if I can draw the stage a bit bigger. Let's do the stage like this, and we've got 2 speakers playing to the audience here. And another speaker over here, like so. Let's say our drums are here. You've got your vocalist here. I can't remember who was on the other side. You've got your guitarist, you've got your violinist, bass, and electric guitar over here. So, this sound is coming out here. The vocalist is going into a microphone, which is also being projected out the front. The drummer can't really hear much. That's alright. What we're going to do is we're going to set up effectively the same system, but also playing back to them. And therefore you would want 2 things called monitors, or you might have 2 monitors, or you might have more. In this example we're going to say 2. So we're going to have maybe 1 down the front, like this. This is just a speaker. And we might have 1 further back so the bass and the drums can hear. Remember, you could have loads of these. You could have loads of speakers out the front, you could even have a sub. You could get over the top and do quite a lot of speakers everywhere, and it could get very expensive very soon. If this is your first event, I'd recommend just getting a couple. You know, bands that play often, bands that play in pubs, they're used to this kind of setup where they have to hear each other acoustically. You know, maybe the singer will just turn around and sing to the drummer. I've heard quite a lot. It's not uncommon. Usually musicians know what they want, and if you can just give them the minimum, certainly on your first event, they'll be more than happy. And a pint. Musicians like pints. Okay, so in this example, we've already talked about these 2 being covered and how we get the sound to them. from our stage box over here. Let's call our returns A, B, C and D. A, I've already said, goes over here. B goes over here. Now these are powered, as I said, so you don't need an amplifier because they've got the amplifiers built in. And I'd recommend doing exactly the same for your on-stage monitors, which are just speakers as well. You can get some good little speakers, maybe 250 watt speakers that are just enough to go to the stage. Remember, they don't need to be as big as the ones out front because they're not covering such a large space. So C would go to maybe this one, and D I like having on a drummer. You could obviously make this a lot more neat and tidy, go around the back. I'm an absolute arse for taping down absolutely everything and making it beautiful and making it trip hazard free. However, this is your basic setup. Now your outputs that are going to your monitors, if I can just get rid of this now and go back to our other page, your outputs are going to be treated slightly differently. Instead of going out of your master out, we will do these things called auxes. And auxes are this one on the mixer. You can see you can send a percentage. Whereas this is sending all of the signal out of your stereo output. This will send a percentage of the sound to your monitors. So for example, we have our vocalist coming in down this channel, and she would like to be sent a little bit to, where are we talking about? Oh, I've lost the page. Here we go. Would like to be sent to D. So maybe we're going to have aux 1 as being C and aux 2 being D. So the drummer would like to hear a little bit, so we send a little bit of her to D. That will come out of our aux send 1 and 2, and because it's D it will come out 2. That will go back down the loom all the way to the stage box, come out and go to D. So now your drummer can hear a little bit of that. And it's exactly the same for if you were using that for your acoustic guitar. Maybe your acoustic guitar is into 4, and in fact the vocalist wanted to hear a little bit more. Because we have this one next to the vocalist, we would send it down C, which would be number 1. So now that's going to be our acoustic guitar. Give it a good volume, maybe roll off the bottom, whatever you want to do to it. But because you've got this little bit of send, that will go to them on C. That's a little bit about mixes. That's a little bit about layout. We can also add two 250 watt speakers or monitors. Powered again, I would advise. If this is your first one, don't worry about amps, don't worry about having extra cables and extra things to worry about. Unless obviously you have an engineer or someone else who knows what's going on, then that's fine. But if you don't know what's going on, I advise getting stuff that is rated for your speakers so you don't end up blowing up your speakers. Because I've seen a lot of people do that. They just get the biggest of everything and they end up going through quite a lot of equipment. You'll also, for this, need to accommodate having more cables going out from the stage box to this. And you don't need to worry about the differences between speaker cables and instrument cables because all of this is line level until you get to the amp, which is then when it gets amplified. Anyway, I hope that gives you an idea, a starting point for your birthday, for your party, for an event, whatever you're doing. This has been my first video. I'd really appreciate some constructive criticism, maybe some feedback. If you didn't know anything about sound before and this is just giving you a blueprint to an event you might want to put on, as I said, you don't need to have this long loom. You could put the desk over here and you could go straight into the desk, save yourself a bit of money. Don't have to mic up everything on stage. Maybe if you've just got a DJ, they'll just want 2 RCA inputs, which, if you remember, are these little puppies. So if you've just got a DJ, you don't need to worry about all the mics and all the cables. You can get rid of quite a lot of that. You just set up some decks. The DJ will know what they're doing with their decks, and they just want a stereo input, which will go into your mixer, and that will come out of the speakers, and you can have a good time. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I said, give us a comment. Hopefully like the video. I hope I don't get too many people saying, oh, you should have said this, should have said that. I've tried to keep it as simple as possible. Hopefully see you on the next one. Thanks for listening.